Hey, everybody. Welcome to Gridiron Gurus. I'm Travis Lazarczyk for the Kennebec Journal and Morning Sentinel, alongside, as always, Drew Bonifant. Drew, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Glad you got your trick-or-treating in and could join us tonight.
Absolutely. Never miss it.
Yeah, our guest tonight is Winthrop Monmouth Halldale head coach Dave St. Hilaire. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Did you get in your trick-or-treating?
I did.
All right. Coach, your team with the number one seed in Class D South got a bye this week. How are you guys spending it?
Well, we had a plan A set up, and then the weather kind of threw a wrench into it.
Yeah.
So the first 2 days we were outside, and we worked offensively, defensively. Today we decided, hey, let's go into the gym. We're not going to get much out of a practice outside. In a regular gym practice, we're not going to get much. So what we did is we did an hour's worth of work. We did a 20-minute session of weight room and then 2 20-minute sessions of plyos, and we put the kids through. We called it this is our game for the week. So try to stay in shape, really.
Sure. With no opponent to get ready for, are you spending this week kind of self-scouting, fine-tuning stuff?
Yeah, we saw some issues that we were exposed Friday night versus Spruce. So we've gone and kind of tweaked a couple things. But then the other part is just making sure that we're crisp and getting our reps offensively, defensively, 7-on-7 looks both offensively and defensively, and a couple areas in special teams where we saw there was a need.
I got to think if a team is either banged up health-wise or just kind of struggling from a gameplay perspective, the bye is really nice to get that chance to hit the reboot button. But you guys are coming off 7 straight wins. Things are really working well, at least on paper for you guys. So is the bye then something you don't want to see, or do you always welcome a bye whenever you can get it?
A few years ago, we had 2 byes back-to-back weeks. So we didn't play for 3 weeks, and that was extremely tough.
Yeah.
With this one, we get a lot during practice. We get crisp. We have good looks offensively and defensively against our number 2s. We kind of look forward to having the bye week because, hey, we've earned this right to kind of sit and wait for the home field advantage and wait for teams to come to us. It really doesn't matter. We would have done well with either one.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty healthy, so it's not like we had to rest up. But it's staying mentally sharp is the biggest thing right now.
It's got to just be nice to have the guarantee of people being 100% health-wise or as close to it as you were, rather than worrying about somebody hurting something in even in the final minutes of a runaway game or something.
Yeah, well, in Class D, you get thin quick.
Yeah.
Right. We think we're a pretty deep team. You get thin quick at different spots. But we found out in 2016 we thought we were healthy, and boy, within the one game we were not healthy, and it happens quick.
You'll be facing the winner of tomorrow night's Mountain Valley Spruce Mountain game, 2 teams you saw in the regular season.
Yep.
Kind of break them down for us.
Well, Mountain Valley took a few weeks to get their feet underneath them. New coach, new offense, and by week 3 or 4, they started to become a better team. And the first time they played Spruce, they had the ball on the 1-yard line 2 different times and couldn't punch it in. And one of those times, 2 plays after they couldn't punch it in, Spruce went 94 yards for a touchdown. So it's they're a pretty competitive team. They're not as explosive as Spruce. Spruce has a quarterback that's very tough. He can run the ball. He can throw well. He can take some hits, too, as we found out last week. And then they have Brandon Fry, who's very explosive, and you give him 10 touches, he's scoring 4 touchdowns.
Sure.
So that's what Mountain Valley is going to have to be up against is that speed, quickness, and explosive. He can score from any place on the field. We had
Walter Polke here a couple weeks ago for Messalonsk, and he was sharing his experience on those Class D teams, and he said about Spruce, Jack Bryant, the quarterback, however he goes, they go. Is that pretty much the story with them? If he's on, they're a really tough team to beat.
Yeah, he doesn't make mistakes. He's a physical kid. He's a hard runner. He's there with Fry's their change-up guy that can be explosive and run to the outside. He's the guy between the tackles.
Yeah.
So he takes a lot of hits, but he just keeps on coming.
I mean, with a guy that runs like that, is tackling something you would emphasize? Assuming Spruce becomes the team that you're playing next, is that something you emphasize? Going low, taking out, going for the ankle, stuff like that.
We worked on open field tackling because a couple times our outside linebackers, we had him for losses. It'd be like 3rd and 8, and we'd have him for a loss or a 2-yard gain, 3-yard gain, and we let him slip away. So we've put a focus to open field tackling this week. He's quick on the outside, strong between the tackles, but he is quick on the outside as well.
Okay. The other playoff game in Class D South this week is Madison playing at Oak Hill. Madison gets in as a 6th seed. They actually finished 7th in the Crabtree point standings, but with Camden Hills playing down, they were ineligible. So Madison slides in. Coach, you saw both of these teams. How do you see this one stacking up?
Madison is just not quite ready to
very
defensively
young
and offensively.
Yeah.
They will battle. They battle from the start of the game to the end of the game. They're just not as skilled offensively and defensively. They're not in the right place sometimes. It's you can see they're young, and Coach Withy's doing a nice job of trying to get them up to speed. Oak Hill is one of those teams that they've had a pretty tough schedule. Mm-hmm. When we looked at our schedule early in the season, we thought we had a tough schedule, but then they get Bucksport and York, and those are pretty solid teams.
Yeah.
But they can pass the ball, they can run the ball. They're junior heavy. They kind of got beat physically last week in the second half against Lisbon, and I'd look for them to rebound this weekend.
Yeah, that's. Madison has been playing better of late than they were at the start of the year, but you still wonder, if they have quite enough to close the gap against Oak Hill, because it was really wide when they played earlier. I think it was a 48-21 Oak Hill win, and it was that only because Doucette called the dogs off and didn't let the score get out of hand after the first half. They just ran all over them. So need to see if Madison can close the gap and make it a little more of a closer game. But it'd be tough to see them actually overcome, be able to swing the game in their favor, given how far apart the teams looked in the first matchup.
Yeah, I would think Oak Hill would have to make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, turnovers, stuff like that, or
turnovers, penalties.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they can if they could slip up enough on defense. I mean, it was just they had a committee running attack going in that game, and it wasn't just running through holes, but it was shaking off defenders. Madison just looked like they couldn't bring him to the ground, whether it was Caden Thompson getting the ball, whether it was Rostron running himself. Tiger Hopkins ran for 100 yards that game. Mm-hmm. So Oak Hill has a lot on the ground, and it's a lot for Madison to measure up to.
Right. Okay, in 8-man playoffs, we have the first 8-man playoff system this year. In the large school division, we have number 4 Ellsworth playing at undefeated number 1 Maranacook. Drew.
Yeah, rematch of a game. Maranacook won 22-12. It was one of Maranacook's closer and tougher games this year. And, you should think of Maranacook as being the favorite. I mean, they've beaten everybody that's come their way this year. They've beaten teams of different styles. But it shouldn't be an easy game based on that head-to-head matchup. And also, Ellsworth last week, they compiled over 500 total yards of offense. Their quarterback, Connor Crawford, ran for 274 yards. So they can move the ball. They can get a lot of offense going. They played the worst defense in the league last week, so that's a disclaimer. Great New Gloucester, and Maranacook has the best defense. So that might be a bit of a shock for Ellsworth, but. Maranacook's had some games where you look at it and you think this should be a runaway, and it isn't. I mean, they're defense first, so there can be games where they're playing with only 6-8 points separating them, but they're comfortable to play that way.
Sure. All right, we'll go up to Class C North with Old Town playing at MCI. Coach, you saw MCI. It was a while ago. It was 2 months ago, week 1 of the regular season. But what stuck out about the Huskies when you played them?
They're a physical team, and they're decently running the ball this year. They lost, as you know, a lot of kids that could run last year.
Right.
But they've got 2 receivers that are very good, explosive receivers. One guy one of them had 2 one-handed catches against us.
Dominic Wilson.
Yeah, and they've got some skilled weapons and big physical up front, and that middle linebacker is pretty tough too.
Yeah, Isaac Buzzle, who has been playing a little bit in the backfield now too, with some injuries to their starting backfield, and you'd think maybe they'd lose a step without him on the offensive line, but it seems like they were able to plug some kids in and keep going.
Not the first Buzzle to go to fullback either.
Right. His older brother did, who's now a defensive lineman at Maine Maritime Academy. The other game that we're looking at in the North this weekend is Madomic Valley at Winslow. These teams met in week 3 of the regular season, and Winslow came away with a 76-6 win. Drew, like we talked about with Madison, is probably going to take a monumental effort from Madomic Valley and a lot of mistakes from Winslow for this game to flip.
Yeah, Winslow's going to really have to help him out. And again, kind of the same question: can Madomic make a little bit more respectable out there with just the advantage of seeing a team for a second time and maybe getting better as the season's gone on? Because that game was pretty early in the season, wasn't it?
Week 3, yeah.
Week 3, yeah. So, you kind of think that teams may have worked out some kinks in between now and then, but 70 points is a lot of kinks to work out.
Yeah.
It's and Winslow has just been a juggernaut against all teams they've played this week. So I mean, you got to think they're going to come in and pick up right where they left off.
Right. Coach, you've probably never been on the losing end of a 70-point deficit where you've had to play that team again, but I'm sure you have been in a case where you've had to meet a team in the playoffs that did beat you in the regular season. What do you kind of tell your team to try to get them up, to get their confidence up? Hey, you can play with this team and you can beat them.
You somehow try to find some sort of hope. Hey, we've got this. We've run the ball, and we can do this. We can do that. Hey, this is a good matchup. If we can isolate this linebacker on, look at this linebacker on film. Yeah. We can match him up with this. You try to find whatever positive you can, and then hope you're in it through 3 quarters. Yeah. But it's got to be tough when 70 points down. It's
a lot to make up. Yeah, and now have you been on the other side of it where you did lose to a team in the regular season and turn around and beat them in the playoffs?
Yeah, last year we played Spruce Mountain week 1, and we lost. I think it was 36-8.
That's a pretty lopsided.
Yeah,
game.
And then we beat them in the return match in the first round of the playoffs, 38-0. So it was 2 totally different games. They were a little banged up when we played them the second time, and they got more banged up as the game went along. But it was. We've thrown that out to the kids and said, you know what, we might be beating a lot of teams by this score, but this can happen. Yeah. And if you want proof, you guys lived it last year on the other side of it.
Yeah, in high school football, 2 months could be a lifetime. And, if I'm Madomic Valley's coaching staff, I'm reminding my players that every day in practice. Like, you can't think of something that happened in mid-September. This is November now, and, we're a different team. They're a different team. So.
Yeah, especially in with your example, class 2, where if Spruce Mountain was banged up, you take that one player out of the mix, it can change things drastically. It is pretty surprising that it went from not 36-8 or 38-6, whatever, I can't remember what you said. But it's not like it went from that to being 12-6, where you patch up 1 or 2 things to it was a completely wildly different game. That's pretty that's pretty surprising to see. And I remember hearing that score and being surprised. Wait, am I seeing those teams in the right order? But yeah, I mean. You always hear players, and going back to the Winslow and Madomic example, you always hear players say, we were confident coming in. We liked our chances coming in, and coaches say, well, we were confident in the game plan. But I do wonder if sometimes teams go in there thinking, we're probably going to lose, but if we could just if the goal wasn't to win, the goal was to hang around and then hope that things just kind of get out of control from there to give you that extra push you need.
Well, kids are pretty smart, so if they don't think you have a chance and you're trying to sell something that they're not going to buy, they'll call you out on it pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, there are times, I remember covering a game, over 10 years ago now because I'm old now, that Lawrence beat Skowhegan in the regular season 35-0, something like that, and then when they met in the PTC semifinals, Skowhegan turned around, won by, I think, 2 touchdowns at Lawrence, at Keyes Field, which is a tough place to play regular season, never mind, playoffs when Lawrence is undefeated. So it's doable. You just have to have the right kids with the right mindset.
Yeah, and probably the right coaches who know how to push the players' buttons, and a mix of seniors and juniors who can say, you think freshman and sophomore might be a little more impressionable and might not be able to just shake off a loss like that. But last year, Coney beat Brunswick convincingly, something like by 20 points or something, and not week 1, but last game of the season.
And 2
and
weeks
they came
later,
back, had a rematch 2 weeks later, and the score flipped. And it was, and talking to the Brunswick players, they were saying, no, we knew we were even after in the moments after we lost that game, we knew if we had a rematch, it could go our way. So.
You can feel it sometimes when you're getting beat by that much. Like it's a big play here or there, but otherwise you're stopping them.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're turning the ball over. So,
or if it's if they're just running one play that you have no way of stopping that night, but if you just a little film work, you can figure out the answer, and now all of a sudden you've completely taken that element out of it. So, yeah, there's I don't know if we're now building a case for Monmouth to win this game, but
probably not. But yeah. I don't see another 70-point game.
I wouldn't either, with being later in the season, tougher to score. But Winslow is if any team's going to do it, it's Winslow.
Right. All right, let's look at Class B North, another game that was played early in the season. Mount Blue and Coney played in Week 1. Coney came away from Farmington with a 35-18 win. They're meeting in the 7 versus 2 game, Drew. But Mount Blue is a team that just seems to be getting better all year, despite coming off a 51-34 loss to Skowhegan last week. This is a team that could pull off an upset.
They could, and this is not your typical 7 versus 2 matchup. And, it just goes to show the value of 1 point. 1 point being the difference between Brewer and Gardner when they played. If Gardner changes that result, it's Coney's playing Gardner in this game, and instead of a much more easy matchup, and Brewer goes to play Brunswick, and Coney gets this Mount Blue team that was fighting for home field just a week ago. So it's a tough matchup the way it shook out, because Mount Blue, when they've looked good, they've looked really, really good this year. So the upset is definitely on the table here this week.
Yeah, no, they played another spread offense like Coney will show them last week against Skowhegan. Skowhegan had some success running the ball up the middle with Mason Fitzgerald, which Coney will love to do, and passing the perimeter. So the Cougars just got to tighten up against an offense that's very similar to one they just struggled against.
Yeah, you got to think Coney's main objective is going to be just to ground the Cougars down and just force them to, okay, how often do you want to tackle Riley Geyer with a head of steam and Jamal Cariglia with a head of steam? And then if they're able to do that, then you might see kind of what happened last week against Gardner. They did the same thing. They came out running the ball. Gardner was able to handle it time and time again. So Coney started to throw slants and started to throw screen passes and stuff to the outside, trying to lighten the run defense. So I wonder if that's going to be the way this game goes this week too.
Yeah. Coach, I'll ask you, when you play a team in the playoffs that you had success against in the regular season, how much do you change from your game plan, or do you just say, hey, we ran all over them last time, we'll do it again?
You got to have something up your sleeve.
Yeah.
There's going to be some adjustments made by the other team, and you have to be ready to have something else for them to adjust to. You can't just go with, hey, same game plan, let's go.
Yeah. Do you think that sometimes with rematches like this, it tends to favor if it was a close game the first time, it tends to favor the team that's coming off a loss, because they're going to be more incentivized to change what they do, and the winning team might feel more of an urge to, let's just stick with what worked the first time.
Well, I'm sure up to Mount Blue, they're saying, you know what, we didn't play well last week. Here's a chance.
Yeah.
Going forward, you're not going to have a second chance. This is your second chance this week. Right. And it was just a total surprise for the results for both of those teams last week, where they're both playing well, and for Mount Blue to come out and lose, give up 51 points. That's the most surprising thing. Lose one thing, but to give up 51,
sure,
is they're going to be hungry.
Especially if they had an 11-point lead at the half, and to have it switch like that is something you got to get over with quickly.
You certainly do. It's you can't get it back that game. Week one we felt with MCI. You know what? Hey, we're in this game where we're controlling it, and it goes south quick.
Right.
And when it starts going south, if you don't bring it back, it's not a good result, especially playoffs.
Yeah. Another game from the regular season, the PTCB, that was kind of a lopsided affair early in the season. Lawrence beat Falmouth Greely 43-12. Falmouth Greely coming to Kai's Field this weekend, Drew, in the 6 versus 3 matchup.
Yeah, that game was kind of put Lawrence on the map early in the season, it felt like. I think a lot of people thought Falmouth Greely, with all, with two fairly large schools coming together, that this was going to be a team that was just going to have so many numbers to its advantage. And then they go to Lawrence, and Lawrence really kicked them around pretty good. So, it would be interesting to go through the previous years and see how many 3 seeds look as strong as this Lawrence team does, because they've kind of been overshadowed by having 2 undefeated teams above them.
Definitely.
But they've played some good teams and played pretty well on balance throughout the whole season.
Yeah, it seems like the PTC this year is very top-heavy with Brunswick and Coney both 8-0, and then Lawrence 7-1. And then there seems to be a significant drop-off, I think.
Yeah, because it feels like in years past you would have teams like Skowhegan where, they would look really good because they'd score a bunch of points, but they couldn't stop anybody.
Right.
Or, Coney was kind of the same way. Or, Lawrence would have a lot going for them, but they would only be a 5-3 team, Brunswick might be the team that was head and shoulders above.
There seems to be less parity this year.
Yeah, I mean, you have some teams. You have, Windham was that kind of can play anybody tough 4-4 team, but for the most part, it was your teams that were trying to sneak into the playoffs were Brewer and Gardner with 1 or 2 wins, and you had your teams in Brunswick and Coney that were undefeated at the top. So it felt like it was a little more towards the pullers than
the middle class was much smaller.
Yeah, exactly.
Metaphor for life. Skowhegan, speaking of them, and Windham playing the 5-4 game. Skowhegan moved up from 7-5 with that win over Mount Blue. This is a game where they did not play each other in the regular season, Drew. So there's probably a little feeling out to be had early on.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's probably different than when you play in week 1 or week 2 when you don't really know what you're facing. Now you have a whole season worth of film to go off of, but it does still have that unknown factor. And Skowhegan over the course of the last few weeks has been has looked like one of the teams that's starting to get on a roll, starting to feel good about itself, and they've played. We were talking about the tough schedule for Oak Hill. They've had one of the toughest schedules in Class B. They opened with Brunswick, Coney, and Lawrence.
Yeah, bang. Start out 0-3.
Yeah. Your first 3 games are against teams with a combined 1 loss. Yeah, that's a good way to get off to a nice start in the record in the standings.
Yeah, you could sort of see in that Lawrence game that Skowhegan was starting to pull it together offensively. They had only scored 7 points against Brunswick and 7 more against Coney, but they put up 28, lost to Lawrence 35-28. But this young offense kind of pulled it together. And now junior Cam Green, who's the quarterback, sneakily, if you can say, a kid who threw for this much was sneaky, but 1,500 yards and 17 touchdown passes. So when you saw him at the beginning of the year, you'd never would have seen numbers like that coming out of Skowhegan, but here they are.
Yeah, and a player in Mason Fitzgerald who's starting to
runs, catches it, does a little bit everything.
Somebody you can give the ball to over and over and over again and hope for results.
And a young defense, which is coming along. I mean, 2 freshmen in the secondary accounted for 4 interceptions last week against Mount Blue. Mm-hmm. So they're growing up quickly. Yeah,
and if they can get turnovers throughout their playoff run, that could be the formula for taking down some higher seeds and getting some upsets along the way.
And Windham, similar team, a very young team. I think they have 5 seniors, sophomore quarterback, and Will Ledbetter, who's also improving. So they look good in Lawrence. A tough loss at Kai's Field a few weeks ago. That's a team that looks like they're building for the future, but could have some success in here.
Yeah, and you wonder, without much of a playoff pedigree for those players, they went 0-8 last year. Mm-hmm. Might there be some players who the stage is a little too big for them? I don't know. It would be interesting to see if they're able to play in the playoffs the way they were for parts of the regular season.
Right. Okay, that's going to do it for us this week on Gridiron Gurus. We hope you get out some playoff games and enjoy them. Coach, enjoy the rest of your bye week, and good luck next week.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back next week when we talk about the regional semifinals. For Drew, for Coach St. Hilaire, I'm Travis. Thanks for watching.